All right, so let's see how we can install Rich Text Laravel into an existing Laravel application. What I have over here is the final project of the Laravel Bootcamp, the official one. And yeah, this is the application. I chose the blade track, so if you follow the blade track, you will end up with an application looking like this. As you can see over here, we have a regular text area field. So let's install the Rich Text Laravel package and see what we can do about it. I'm running the application locally using Laravel's new Composer dev script. So I'm gonna close that and then run Composer require tonSM Rich Text Laravel. Next, we are going to run the install script. And yes, I'm gonna run migrations because I'm using SQLite locally. Not that it matters, but okay. So I'm gonna run Composer, run dev again, and I'm gonna open a new tab and start LazyVim over here. And if we refresh, we should see the exact same application. But if we open DevTools in type Tricks, we can see that Tricks is actually installed now. So to get started, let's replace this text area with the Tricks editor. So the package exported a new component to my resources folder, resources, views, components, Tricks input. So this is the field that we are going to use. Let's go to the index page of the chirps route, and then we can replace this text area with a X Tricks input. And then, so I'm gonna copy this and place it as a value prop to the component itself. Then we can remove all this and then give it an ID. So create sure message. And then if we refresh, we should see that it's actually using Tricks already. We'll see how we can style the toolbar later, but to give you an idea, we can wrap the toolbar in a div over here. And then let's say you want to hide the entire toolbar. So you can just say Tricks toolbar hidden and it's gone, but you can still use the rich text stuff using keyboard shortcuts provided by Tricks if you want to. You can also reverse this, so flex call reverse and space Y1, and everything should be like the toolbar should be at the bottom if you want to do that. You can also hide just one of the groups over here using CSS, so we can get the group actually, this Tricks button group, block tools. We can get this class, and then we can say anything that has this class should actually be hidden. You don't actually have that toolbar anymore. We are going to talk more about the toolbar in another video. For now, let's use the default toolbar, and yeah, we are using the Tricks input over here, the Tricks component, input component, but we are not actually using that in the backend. To use it in the backend, we have to go to our Chirp model and then use the has rich text trait over here, and then we can register a new rich text attributes, and then we can specify the list of attributes that we want, and we can give it a name. In this case, since we already have an existing message field, I'm gonna call it content, and then later on we can migrate that data to the new rich text attribute. Let's go back to the Chirp form. Let's rename this input to content now. And then I'm gonna rename this to content as well. And this one to content too. Okay, this one as well. Okay, so if we try to create a Chirp now, it's not going to work, right? Because the controller is actually expecting a message field. But before we are able to submit the field, let's create a migration because we have existing data. So make migration, migrate existing messages to content. All right, so I'm going to use the model over here, and I'm going to get the latest from the oldest one. And I'm gonna type in the Chirp model. Yeah, I should be able to just do update content equals to message. And Let me comment this part out. I'm actually going to remove the down method because we are not going to use that. Let me remove this part as well. We can add it back later. But for this to work, I forgot that we also have to mention to add the content field to the fillable properties if you're using fillable properties. If you're using unguarded models, you don't have to do that. So let's run the migration. I'm going to open the terminal over here and run artisan migrate. This should put all my existing messages into a contents rich text attribute. So if I run artisan tinker and I get the first chirp, I still see the message field, but I should be able to also fetch the content, and that's a model, rich text model. And this is how it's actually stored. There's a polymorphic relationship that points back to this model and specifies the name of the field. So when we are setting the field, even though the API looks like a regular attribute, it's actually forwarding that to a relationship. So this rich text attribute is actually stored in a separate database table, potentially even in a separate database if you want to. But that's something for another time. For now, it's important to know that the HTML blob is actually stored in a separate table. But as you can see over here, the contents of that table is actually stored in plain text. Let's fix that. The package ships with a feature of encryption. So you can configure this attribute to be encrypted, which is going to use Laravel's encryption features. And now we can migrate, roll back one step, and migrate forward one more time. And then we can start Tinker again and check the content. And as you can see, it's actually stored encrypted at rest, but you can still decrypt it if you want to. Like if you just convert this to a string, it's converted to an HTML. You can also ask it to convert to HTML if you want to. But yeah, now we can actually drop this message, the old message column, right? Because all the messages were migrated to content. So let's do that. Schema, drop columns, and then chirps. The column is message, and then we should be able to migrate rollback and migrate forward again. Now, if we start a Tinker session and get the first chirp, there should be no message column. And yeah, that's true. Cool. We still have the content over here. Ideally, if you were in production migrating data, you should do this in separate deployments, in separate steps. First, you migrate your data, and at the same time, you change the ingestion to also feed both fields, both the rich text and the content field. And then in a separate deploy, you can switch the application to use the new content field. And then in a third deploy, you can remove the column. There's a refactoring database step that you can do that, but again, outside of the scope of this video. So let's take a look at the application. Refresh, and we don't actually see. Oh, there's one more thing over here. We actually, to avoid touching the chirps models timestamps, we have to wrap this entire thing in a without touching block. Because since these rich text attributes are actually relationships, we are using the model touching features of Laravel to update the parent model's timestamps. If you don't want that, you have to wrap it in a without touching block. As you can see over here, something is not right? Let's go to the index route again. And then over here, let's replace this with a div instead, because we are rendering rich text content, and then this has to be content. If we go back, we should see that the HTML is actually escaped over here, and we don't want to do that. There's going to be another video dedicated to cross-site scripting attacks and how you can mitigate that with HTML sanitization and also with content security policy. But for now, let's actually introduce a security issue over here. We'll fix it later, don't worry. So as you can see, this is actually rendered correctly. Now let's update the controller because it's still not working over here because it's expecting a message attribute. So if we go to the controller, chirp controller, and we can replace this with content. And also, it doesn't actually make sense to limit the HTML ingestion over here. We could do that, but I'm choosing not to limit. Yeah, let's take a look over here. Let's try again. Hello world. and then bold, italic, and post, and it works. Editing still shows the text area because that's in another form over here, which we have to apply the same changes that we did to the create form. Use the tricks input over here and then replace this with this. And then over here, we have to give it an ID. So this will be Sherp and then the Sherp ID and then the content field. So content over here should be content 2 and over here as well. So this is actually not going to work as you expect. And that's because this rich text attribute is actually a model. So we have to call the toTricks HTML over here before we pass it to the input. So now it's actually working. This is a different render of the content itself, which is specific and should be lowercase, of course. This is specific to feeding the tricks editor with data. Now everything should work. If we save, let's make this a link over here and save, and everything should be working. Okay. So yeah, that's actually it. So just to recap, we have to use, and I can remove this. We have to use the trait in our model, then register the fields that we want to have as rich text attributes. These fields, again, they are stored in a separate table in the database, a table called rich texts. And you can have more than one field per model if you want to. Maybe you have a notes field or something like that. You can have that. And you also have to specify the content, the field itself, as a fillable property. And in your controllers, it's just treating them as a regular field. So you run validations like normal, and then you set it in the model like normal. You don't do anything specific for them. The only thing specific is when we are feeding the editor with content over here, and that's because we have to call the toTricks HTML like this. So yeah, that's it. That's how you can install tricks in your existing Laravel application, even migrating the data and all that. So in the next video, we'll talk more about HTML sanitization and how you can mitigate cross-site scripting attacks with that. So please don't skip it. I'll see you there.